afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Black Girl Mental Highlight. Here today on this beautiful Monday afternoon, we have Dr. Tiffany Pogue. She is a scholar, a coach, and a community healer. How are you doing today, Dr. Pogue?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me today, Morgan.
You are so welcome. You're so welcome. It's my honor. Truly, truly, truly. So, your story is impactful, it's powerful, it's full of twists and turns. Tell us a little bit about what it was like to go from college dropout to PhD.
Yes. In fact, I don't think you can talk about that kind of journey in isolation from what else is happening or being connected to other people, which is why I try to do everything I do in community and in groups. So I was a 16-year-old freshman at FAM. Homecoming is coming. Happy homecoming if you're a Rattler. But, I was a 16-year-old freshman at FAM. I really was not mature enough to be at school. Academically, I looked good on paper, but socially, I just wasn't ready. And it led me to making some strange decisions, as young students tend to do. And long story short, I ended up dropping out of school. I spent about 10 years out of school, trying to figure out who I was supposed to be. I ended up in a job that paid pretty well for me to be a college dropout. And that, unfortunately, kind of makes people feel stuck often. So, you get used to this money. You're worried that if you leave the position, you may not be able to get a matching salary or better. So you feel kind of stuck. I felt very isolated because I was living in a different city, a different state from my friends and family. And I came home one day, and the documentary A Long and Mighty Walk by Dr. John Henrik Clarke, produced by Wesley Snipes, was on TV. And I remember after watching that documentary, which gives the history of Black people from the beginning of time up until the Million Man March, I remember at the end of that wondering who tells our story. Like, who is responsible for sharing the strength of the culture, the resilience of the people with young folks? And it was in that moment that I was like, okay, I'm tripping. Let me call my daddy and tell him I'm ready to go back to school. And I did. And he drove all the way to Fayetteville, North Carolina, and packed up the car and drove me back to where I enrolled at Fort Valley State University. So I started at FAMU, but my GPA got so low. In fact, when I tell my students what it was, they're like, it can get that low? Yes, babe, it can get that low. So when it got that low, the only school that would take me was another HBCU, which is one of the reasons why I have undying love and commitment to our schools, because often they take the students that nobody else wants. And so I enrolled in school, and I was looking for a full-time schedule, and I had all the psych classes I needed to get my degree, and I needed one more to be considered full-time. And that one class was Intro to African World Studies with the professor Imwali Mushuja. And I had never taken a Black Studies course before. At FAMU, psychology was very African-centered, very Afrocentric. So I was like, okay, I can pass this class. This will be an easy A, that kind of thing. But long story longer, Shuja ended up being my mentor. And he hired me the second week of classes to be his research assistant. And I think that was the turning point, which is why I always say healing cannot happen in isolation. He saw me not just as a student enrolled in his class, but as a person with a full history and full experiences and things like that. And he exposed me to just so much rich information and wisdom that I vowed if I ever made it to HBCU professoriate, I would be him. I would be him for another student. And when I got ready to graduate, Shuja, I was torn, right? Do I get my master's degree and start practicing psych? Or do I follow my true passion, which is Black studies? Shuja had a visiting scholar there from Zimbabwe, Vimbai Chiba. And Chiba said to me, Tiffany, there's a difference between a vocation and a calling. And I decided to go on and get my master's degree in African New World Studies at Florida International University. And Shuja was like, our people need you to go all the way. So I need you to go all the way. And so that's how I went from a college dropout to getting my PhD from Emory University, because when I finished, same thing happened at Florida International. I had a professor who saw me beyond just my, identity as student. And she asked me what my plans were. I told her I want to do the Black Studies thing, but now I'm thinking about education because I have this influence from Shuja. And she said, well, I think you should apply. The only school I applied to was Emory University. It's very competitive, but I got a full ride. So this is how I ended up with the doctorate. And so I tell my students all the time that, it's no shame in starting over. It's no shame in a dead end. It's no shame in feeling stuck. The comeback is always the best part of the story. But I want to always make it clear to anyone I'm speaking with about the comeback is the comeback did not happen in isolation. I could not have done it without my family encouraging me. My mother can right now tell you to this day how much tuition I owe her from my time at FAM. Right? Your family challenging you and pushing you, but definitely elders who can see you and put you in the right circumstance, in the right situations, and who can show yourself a mirror. Right? At many points in my life, I've forgotten who I was. And it takes other people sometimes to pull you back and to remind you, this is not your potential. This is not your story. This is not your dead end. And so I'm always keen on people understanding that setbacks don't have to be the end of the story.
Wow. Wow. Woven into your story really was the concept of Ubuntu, right?
Right.
I am, right, because we are, just really recognizing the impact of really collective uplift, right? What happens, right, when we lift somebody else up? Ultimately, all of us are lifted up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's like Toni Morrison says, when you get free, your job is then to turn around and help free somebody else.
Yes.
These things are not given to us emptily. Too much whom is given, much is expected, required. Who wants to be the weak link in the chain? What my elders did for me, I'm responsible for doing for someone else. That's part of the rent we pay.
Yeah. Wow. And so reflecting on the power of narrative, right? The power of story. There are narratives that can really elevate us as we reach for those goals, as we achieve those dreams, as we reach for the stars. But there are also some narratives, right? There are also some stories that we can tell ourselves that can bring us down, right? Some ways that we can ruminate on the hurts of the past that can, truly drag us down and truly bring us in that opposite direction, away from those goals and those dreams. Thinking about your story, thinking about the narrative behind your success, what are some ways that you're able to use your pain in order to discern the narratives of those that you work with through your coaching, and also allow them to transform those narratives into something that serves them?
Right. And I think this is where part of my academic training comes into just my coaching. Is in that critical self-reflection that's always occurring, right? Because humans have specificities in experience, but in those specificities, there is insight into what someone else may need to hear from you, right? And so when I'm working with my clients, I'm always looking for an opportunity, not necessarily to share my narrative, but to say, here's how it can play out differently. Here's how I know it can play out differently. I think that's incredibly important. A wise man learns from others' mistakes and a fool learns from his own, right? So I don't have to have lived the exact experience that you may have lived, My responsibility is to show you that when one is faithful to oneself, then things fall into place. When one is faithful to one's own culture, then that culture can support you. And that's what I'm always seeking to do, is to put people in contact with not necessarily my narrative, but with a narrative that comes from their cultural center that aligns with what they're doing. Alice Walker said once that if you trace your line back, it reaches all the way to God, right? So nothing you've done has been done in isolation, and nothing that you have experienced is yours alone. And I know that for many of us, Black women in particular, right, Black women and girls, we're often made to feel like we are different, less than, that we don't measure up, that this is the best that I can get, this is the best that I can demand, and I'm stuck with this lot in life. I think that's when it's most important for us to look at the narratives of women in our communities who have transcended that possibility into something else. History provides that for me, and that's something I want to always help other people connect to, is how many stories of resilience and strength and success do we have at our fingertips? And we're simply not looking in the right places sometimes for the answers that we're seeking.
Wow. Yeah. So looking towards, your story, right? And the ways in which you've sought answers, through your training, right? Through your academic training, through your professorships, you have a very a wealth, right? A wealth not only of experience, right, but also a wealth truly of accolades, right? Thinking about the things that you've done, all that you've overcome, all of the people that you've been able to set free, right? Because you yourself have been set free. What would you say if you could pick one thing you are proudest of in your career thus far?
And I'm proudest of in my career thus far. I had a student one time. In fact, he did not pass my class. He didn't pass my class. And he showed up at my door a couple of weeks later after classes, and I was like, oh Lord, now I'm gonna have to fight with this young man about why I flunked him. So I'm getting my paper. As I see him coming in, I'm getting my grade book in order, trying to pull out, and he simply said to me, Dr. Pogue, I know you planted seeds this semester and you didn't get to see them all grow, but I promise you that they will. And I don't think I've ever been more proud, or that I've ever had a stronger piece of validation that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So to know that, I think this is another Black woman thing, where you want the work you do to have an immediate payback. And when it doesn't come in the way that we think it should come, we carry the guilt, we carry the frustration, the sadness, the fatigue of it all. And sometimes when you have to put the F in the grade book, that's what you feel from these students. But for someone to come back and say, no, listen, I'm not done. What you planted here is not done yet. And I promise you, and he said to me, I promise you I will do better. And the next time I saw that young man, he was bringing I don't have biological children. The next time I saw that young man was a couple of years later, school teacher, right? So he's done what he's supposed to do, and he's got a baby in his arms, and he says, I want you to meet your grandbaby. Oh. And I cried. I probably cried more than the baby did, okay? But that to me is the proudest, is when I know the work that I'm doing has real impact for real people.
Wow. That is incredible. I just can't get that image out of my head, right? The baby crying in his arms, you crying next to the baby. It's profound. It is profound. But yes, definitely I resonate with the desire to want that immediate payback, right? The desire to, put your passion in a microwave and, press 30 seconds and expect a fully cooked, dessert of a passion, right? But definitely, right, just the beauty of the journey, right? The beauty of truly taking one step at a time and doing what you do with the seeds, right?
Right.
That a harvest will come, might not come when we think it should, but when it does come, that harvest will be abundant. So
That's
thank you
true.
for sharing that. Thank you for sharing. Wow. Okay. So we have our last question of the afternoon, which is, what is one thing that you would tell a little Black girl who looks at you and says, I want to be that when I grow up?
Um, you know, in terms of the steps she has to take to reach whatever it is that she's desiring to reach, I don't have that. But what I can say to any Black girl is you are enough.
Mm,
You are enough. And when you hit these circumstances that try to convince you that you are not, when you hit these seasons that seem to be proving to you that you are not, that then is when it's most important to remember that you are. And that what you desire to achieve, you can make it so.
mm. Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Those words are echoing. You are enough. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you, Dr. Pogue. Thank you for appearing on this week's BlackGirlMental highlight. And so you have a new cohort of the Sacred Self group coaching circle, and that's going to start on November 15th.
It
Please.
starts on November 15th.
Okay, okay. So please check out Dr. Pogue's website. Also check out her Instagram. It is at Tiffany D PhD on Instagram. So that is it for now. Please join us next week on Black Girl Mental Highlights. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.